Do not go home tonight and start Googling subnetting and trying to figure out how to do this on your own. It'll confuse you. Okay? So don't do that. Typically what we tell you is that you need to see subnetting 2-3 times, and it helps to see it from different people. Okay, if you go talk to the Cisco 3 folks right now, they will tell you that right now Mr. Pinson is talking to them about subnetting, and some of them get it better his way, and some of them get it better my way. So the glory of it, I guess, is that you come through our program and you likely will see this from more than one of us. All right? Don't go home tonight and start Googling things. Wait. You need to have a decent understanding of this before you go try to teach yourself anything else. One of your classmates gets it and they start trying to explain it to you, don't listen. Okay? That's where you put your fingers in your ears. Don't listen until you understand it on your own. If you have a question, you can come find me and ask me. I would be more than happy to help you. Okay? You can go talk to Mr. Penson. Any one of us, go find somebody and say, talk about subnetting. All right? Okay. So, first, y'all done enough that, first off, I guess, what's an IP address for? What's its job? Say that again? What are the pieces of an IP address? The network and the host portion. How do we do that? If I tell you that here's your IP address, how do you know what part of that is network portion and what part is host? The subnet mask tells me. So I have to, technically, I have to tell you what the subnet mask is. Now, could you have made an assumption about that number before I told you the subnet mask? What assumption could you make? It's a Class C address, which means, how do you know that?
First number, first octet.
Beautiful. I like to hear the right terms. So first octet. First octet tells you what class it's in. All right. Inside your network, you can do whatever you want. So inside the network, we need to see both the IP address and the subnet mask. Outside your network, we don't have to use the subnet mask. The routers make those assumptions. Routers start looking at the first octet and they say, oh, that's a class A or that's a class B, so it pays attention to only those octets that it needs. Right? Okay. What's the range for a class A IP address?
0 to 127.
I'm going to do it this way, 1 to 127, because 0 in this octet is not a valid number. We'll talk about why when I start talking valid numbers and invalid numbers, all right? So what's B?
128.
Yeah, 191. And what's a C? So what? Any other guesses? Don't forget, there is more than just 3 classes. So you can't just go all the way to the end. 223. Okay? When you start looking at the history a little bit of how we got where we are, when routing first started happening, the really smart people that thought all this up said, we can just look at this first octet of an IP address and it'll tell you what network it belongs to. So when we started, they pretty much just designated first octet is network. I said valid, right? Valid numbers. I can't write the number 0. I can't use the number 0. I could write it. I can't use it. It's not valid. So it left me with 1, and what's the biggest number I can write in 8 bits? 255. Which, does anybody know what the number 255 is? What we consider that to be? What type of address we consider that to be? It's a broadcast. If you're not real sure what I'm talking about, we're going to hit all that, okay? So I'm not really allowed to use it. So I really wind up with from number 1 all the way to number 254 as valid, usable, or we call them assignable addresses. So in the dawn of time, in the dawn of routing and networking, we can only use 1 to 254 as network addresses, which meant I had 254 possible networks. I had, on each one of those networks, tons of addresses, but only had 254 networks. The internet would not be what it is if we were still stuck at 254 networks. So a long time ago they said, oops, we're out of addresses. We have to come up with something else. What they came up with was, let's add that subnet mask, and let's do this, what's called the class full addressing system. You wind up with, on a class A network, going from 1 to 127, I get 126 possible networks. Because this one, I'm not allowed to use. What's it for? I don't assign the 127 network. Why not? It's got a particular name. What address starts with 127?
Private.
Private.
No?
It's on the tip of my tongue.
Okay.
Loopback.
Loopback, that's it. So you don't see this address used. So out of a class A, I get 126 networks. Right? Each network has over 16 million possible hosts. Because I take the number 1 and I have 1.0.0.0. That's my network ID. Then I can assign .1, .2, .3, .4, all the way to 255. Then I can change this octet to 1.1.2, .3, so on. And by the time I take all of these up to 255, I have over 16 million different address combinations. For class B, there are, between 123 and 191, there are 16,384 possible networks. Each network, 65,534 different combinations. Class C, I get 2 million, a little more than 2 million different networks, but they only have 254 different combinations, each one of them. So we went from having, just by adding the subnet mask, I went from having 124, I'm sorry, all that was wrong, 254 different networks to millions different networks, just by adding that. Okay? And we're still out of addresses. IP version 4 addresses. You can do whatever you want inside your network. So if I have my network here, connect that to a router, and now I'm going out here, it's in here that we are going to talk about. I can do whatever I want in here, addressing wise. Y'all mentioned one of them. One possibility is that I could just do private addressing in here and change it. We're going to talk about that at the end of all of this. Okay? All right. Before we really get into the meat, though, how are y'all with converting from binary to decimal? I mean, if I write this number up here, can you tell me what it is? What's our first vote? 153? Since I'm not going to add it up, I'm going to assume you're correct. The way I look at it is if you looked at this, if you had a board that had lights behind it, and these numbers could be lit up, because a 0 equals off and a 1 equals on, I am basically saying to you, only add up the numbers that are on. Just add up the numbers that we light up. Binary has two conditions, off and on. They're the very basis of everything a computer understands. Y'all been talking about this since day one of the program. Okay? You have to be able to do this very basic thing, to subnet. Okay? I'm going to give you, step by step, exactly how to subnet. If you write it down and follow it, you will be able to subnet. All day long, twice on Sundays. Okay? But if you don't understand this, you've got to speak up and tell me, I don't know what this is. Can you go the other direction? Can you do, if I tell you to write 200, can you do it? Without using a calculator.
No.
When you go take a certification test that deals with subnetting, you're not allowed to use a calculator. 128, 64. Subtract the biggest number that you can. If you can subtract the number, put a 1. Okay? So if you subtract 128 from 200, what do you wind up with? Now I can still subtract 64. I would put a 1 there. Get 8 left. So I put a 0, a 0, subtract 8, and the rest are 0. Okay with that? Okay. I am not going to slow down for those things that you tell me you can do, because you're going to need all the time for where I'm going. Okay? If you have a problem converting from binary to decimal and back, you have to master that first. Okay? So I'm going to trust that you've got that. All right. Okay.